Okay, let's talk about the world we're living in. It feels like we're surrounded by problems, right?
It really does.
From the stress we carry personally, the tension tearing at our communities, to massive environmental crises, and just general global instability.
Uh-huh.
It can feel overwhelming, and sometimes, honestly, it feels like all the conventional solutions we hear about just aren't cutting deep enough.
That's a feeling many share, I think. And the source material we're diving into today offers a perspective that might explain why those surface-level fixes seem insufficient.
Okay.
It suggests that the root of these very visible, tangible problems might lie not just on the surface, but in a deeper, more subtle realm, what the text calls the subliminal environment of life.
The subliminal environment of life. Intriguing.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're looking at a document describing something called Acharya Sri Ram Sharma's unique spiritual experiment on collective consciousness.
That's the one.
So this isn't like a policy paper or an economic analysis,
Yeah. No.
but an exploration of an unconventional approach to these really deep-seated issues, rooted in spiritual principles as described by this specific source.
Precisely. Our mission for this deep dive, based only on the text provided, is to understand this reported experiment.
Got it.
We'll look at the rationale the source gives for why such an experiment was needed, the principles it outlines regarding subtle energies and collective power,
Right.
the tools it says were used, like chanting, meditation, prayer, and yagya, and the reported outcomes during the period it covers.
Okay.
We're exploring how the source says they conducted this experiment and the principles they followed, drawing only from the provided text rather than attempting to provide instructions for modern communities today.
Understood. So a deep dive into the ideas and reported results presented in this specific text, offering a different lens on tackling big problems.
No.
Okay, let's unpack this.
All right.
The source starts by laying out the disastrous circumstances of the present times, painting a pretty stark picture, especially around the turn of the 21st century, which is the period the text focuses on.
It really does.
It highlights this paradox. Despite enormous scientific and technological advancement, the world is experiencing a void, isolation, shattered values, and just pervasive dissatisfaction.
Yes, it details how this leads to a breakdown in society, things like unchecked ego, avarice, and a focus on immediate pleasure. The text calls it acquiring poison in the name of nectar.
Wow.
How that destroys family and social harmony. There's a noted decline in honesty and austerity, replaced by a pursuit of wealth, fame, and power through, well, any means necessary.
And the source connects this too.
This, the text claims, breeds corruption, intoxication, insidious tendencies, selfishness, deception, quarrels, violence, anarchy, instability. The whole gamut.
And it's not just human behavior, right? The source points to the environment too.
Oh, absolutely. Severe environmental damage, widespread pollution of air, water, soil, even sound pollution, resource depletion, deforestation, climate change impacts like rising temperatures and sea levels, ozone depletion.
Yeah.
And what the text calls nature's wrath, manifesting as droughts, floods, acid rain, landslides, and so on.
It adds to this with social issues, like unchecked population growth, leading to overcrowding, poverty, malnourishment.
And psychological distress, too.
Yeah.
Stress, suspicion, insecurity, fear. And this widening distance between people's hearts, even with all our communication technology.
It feels very current, actually.
It does. The
Yeah.
source even includes global threats like wars, nuclear weapons, and their waste. It doesn't mince words at all. It states that the period feels like humanity is on a horrifying edge, where not only the glory of humanity, but the very existence of human race and life on the earth is put at a risk of total extinction.
That's heavy, really heavy.
It is. But here's the source's core insight, the pivot point, really. It argues that all these overwhelming, visible issues, the social breakdown, the environmental crises, the psychological distress, are just symptoms.
The symptoms.
Yeah. The true root, the real problem it identifies, is something much deeper and more subtle. It calls this the maligning of the subliminal environment of life and a disturbance in the subtle flow of consciousness in nature.
Okay. Like treating a fever without addressing the infection causing it. You're only dealing with the effect, not the root cause.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. The source uses one from Ayurveda, where imbalances in the body's fundamental humors, Vat, Pitta, Kapha, are seen as causing physical sickness.
Right. You have to balance the system.
Exactly. You can try to suppress the symptoms, but true healing, according to that system, requires restoring the fundamental balance. Similarly, the text argues, to address the deep-rooted global crisis, you must purify and harmonize this fundamental, subtle environment of consciousness.
Here's where it gets really interesting then, this idea that subtle forces are the primary driver behind massive visible problems. It's not a perspective you hear much in mainstream problem solving.
No, it's definitely unconventional.
But the source connects it to things we might intuitively recognize, like how a collective mood in a crowd can just sweep individuals into mob psychology. Or didn't it give an example about Gandhi?
Yes, it does. It gives the example of Mahatma Gandhi's thoughts and efforts, creating such a powerful atmosphere of patriotism and determination that millions were inspired to participate in a nonviolent movement for freedom, literally changing the course of history.
Right.
The source suggests these aren't just isolated events, but stem from or create a powerful, pervasive atmosphere that influences everyone. A subtle field effect, almost.
Okay, so that's the premise. And it leads to the source's next key insight.
Yeah.
Because the root cause is subtle, these imbalances in consciousness and the subliminal environment, the remedy must also be of a compatible, subtle nature.
That's the logic presented. It proposes that purifying this subtle flow of consciousness requires a powerful collective spiritual force.
Okay, so individual spiritual or ethical efforts are important for personal growth, but maybe their widespread influence on a global scale is limited. Is that the idea?
That's the distinction the source makes, yeah. Individual efforts are vital for self-purification, absolutely. But addressing a widespread social ailment, a global crisis rooted in consciousness, that requires a far greater force, a collective spiritual endeavor.
And it uses analogies for this.
It does, some powerful physical analogies to illustrate the increased strength found in union, like knitting dry glass strands into a strong rope, or grouping flimsy wickers together to make an effective broom.
Okay, simple examples.
Or joining small bricks to build massive, stable buildings.
Yeah.
Or focusing scattered sun rays with a lens to generate intense heat that can actually start a fire.
Right, concentrating the energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It emphasizes that in the realm of consciousness and spirituality, the combined, synchronized effect is far more significant than the sum of individual parts. It suggests a dynamic where 1 and 1 equals 11, or maybe even exponentially more.
Wow. So collective spiritual effort isn't just a nice thing to do. It's presented by the source as a necessary force to counteract a pervasive, subtle problem that individual actions alone can't really fix.
That's precisely the argument. And this document offers historical examples that it presents as evidence for this idea.
Like what?
Well, it cites accounts like the Deva-Asura War, where divine powers combined to create goddess Durga, or the story of rishis donating blood to create goddess Sita, interpreted as the potent, united force of their collective consciousness.
Interesting interpretations.
It also talks about Ram and Lakshman choosing to use an army of monkeys and bears in the battle against Ravana, or Lord Krishna striving for the unity of forces in the Mahabharata war, or encouraging collective participation in lifting Govardhan Hill.
So emphasizing the mass movement aspect, even when divine power is apparently available.
That seems to be the interpretation presented, yes, suggesting the importance of collective effort. It also includes Buddha's Sangha spreading peace through collective spiritual practice, and again, Gandhi's nonviolent mass movement shaking the British Empire.
Framing these as examples of collective spiritual or consciousness-based power achieving massive visible results.
Exactly. And it even mentions the ancient tradition of Kumbh Mela, which it describes not just as a religious gathering, but historically as a forum where great saints and scholars would meet, discuss global problems, and formulate solutions through collective spiritual energy and wisdom.
Okay.
The text even points to the use of plural pronouns, like all of us in Vedic hymns, as scriptural support for prioritizing collective welfare. It's fascinating how the source draws connections across mythology, history, and scripture to bolster this concept of collective spiritual power.
It really is. Now let's get into the specifics of the tools and principles the source says were utilized in this experiment, aimed at purifying that subliminal environment. It starts with something called the cosmic power of sound, Shabda Shakti.
Yes, the source posits this fundamental principle, the cosmic power of sound. The insight here is that sound isn't just something we hear, but a fundamental, omnipresent energy, maybe the very basis of creation itself.
Like the Big Bang.
The text links it to both the modern scientific Big Bang theory and the Vedic affirmation of the eternal foundational sound, Om. It even mentions modern scientific parallels cited in the text, where electromagnetic waves are seen as the basis of matter, and how sound, in some views, is considered even more fundamental, possibly capable of generating light and heat.
Okay, so sound as foundational energy. How does that relate to the experiment?
Well, building on that idea, the source delves into the hidden power of mantras. It describes them as coded formulae or sonic devices developed by ancient rishis who supposedly understood this cosmic power of sound.
Coded formulae, sonic devices, so more than just prayers or affirmations.
According to this document, yes, much more. These mantras are far more than just words or their literal meaning. The syllables themselves, in specific combinations, rhythm, and duration, are believed to contain latent energy.
And chanting activates this energy.
Enunciating them precisely activates mantra shakti, which the source describes as a conscious energy capable of influencing both the inner realms of the practitioner, their mind and spirit, and the external surrounding environment through resonant vibrations.
So the sound pattern and the repetition, that's really key.
Yes, the source emphasizes that the sonic pattern and the compilation of syllables are crucial, often considered more significant than the literal meaning alone, because they're believed to resonate with deeper cosmic energies.
Okay.
The text provides analogies for how rhythmic, cyclic motion generates power, like the rhythmic sound of marching soldiers causing a bridge to collapse, or the sound of a dancer's gungroos, those ankle bells, vibrating the walls.
Right, resonance.
Exactly. It uses these to explain how repetitive chanting or japa works. This continuous rhythmic enunciation, combined with the practitioner's focused consciousness, is said to stimulate latent energy centers in the body and generate powerful vibrations that spread outwards, influencing the surrounding environment.
And collective japa, then, would amplify these effects dramatically.
That's precisely the claim the source makes. Collective japa multiplies these individual effects through what it calls coherent superposition, where the harmonious vibrations generated by many individuals practicing together align and combine, creating a much stronger, magnified effect than isolated practice, like tuning forks resonating together.
Got it. And the source gives special prominence to one specific mantra, right? The Gayatri Mantra.
Yes, it's presented as central to the experiment, the divine Gayatri Mantra. The source describes it as the crown of all mantras, the origin of all Vedas, and states its uniqueness is unanimously accepted by saints and scholars across different traditions.
What makes it so special according to the text?
It describes Gayatri as Adya Shakti, the primal energy, the mother of creation, the mother of the Vedas, the mother of the Devas or divine powers, and the mother of the world. The text links its realization on Earth to Rishi Vishwamitra.
And its structure.
Its structure, according to the source, is unique, composed of 24 specific syllables, and its core meaning is presented as a universal prayer for righteous intellect.
Righteous intellect. That seems relevant.
Very much so. The source quotes that core prayer phrase, Dio Yona Prachodayat, emphasizing its vital relevance today against what it calls perverted thinking.
Okay.
The text also includes a really powerful quote attributed to Arthur Koestler, claiming the Gayatri Mantra is more powerful than thousands of atom bombs, and that collective japa by Indians could annul all the hazards of nuclear warfare and protect the globe.
Wow, that's a huge claim.
It definitely highlights the magnitude of the power the source attributes to this specific mantra, especially when used collectively. It's presented as having immense potential to impact spiritual, mental, even physical realms, fostering prudent thinking and uniting the world through love and compassion.
So the collective experiment was really focused on harnessing this specific mantra's power.
Primarily, yes, through Gayatri, to counter declining trends and purify the environment, as the source describes it.
And beyond the mantra itself, the source discusses Gayatri meditation as another core practice.
Yes, described as deep meditation focused on the rising sun.
The actual sun.
The source identifies the sun as the gross, visible body of Savitor, the deity associated with Gayatri. It presents the sun as a universal symbol of divinity, life, and crucially, a fundamental source of prana shakti, the universal life force energy.
Okay, so how does this meditation work according to the source's description? What does it supposedly do?
The text claims that by focusing on the rising sun during Gayatri meditation, the practitioner's soul links with Savitor, allowing them to absorb prana shakti from this cosmic source.
And this energy does what?
This influx of energy is said to have multifaceted effects, strengthening the physical body, instilling courage, mental stability, and sagacity in the mind, and cultivating virtues like faith, prudence, compassion, and altruism in the inner self, basically leading to a transformation of the person from within.
Interesting. The source also highlights the significance of collective prayer as another vital tool.
Right. It describes prayer as a call of the soul that reaches God, a sincere appeal believed to bring blessings, and states it is an endeavor of mankind that is most certain to succeed.
Strong words.
It quotes Tennyson's famous line suggesting prayer is a power that can annul hardest of the hardships and even mold the laws of nature.
Wow. Does it offer any evidence for this power?
Well, it cites specific examples presented as evidence, like research by Dr. Alexis Carroll, claiming prayer can contribute to curing diseases like cancer. And it mentions its documented psychological effects, such as eradicating tension and worries.
And again, the collective aspect is important.
Hugely important, similar to japa, it emphasizes the magnifying effect of collective prayer. The text gives examples like the unified power of namaz, or mass prayers. It even includes an anecdote about the Niagara waterfall reportedly freezing over in severe cold and then rapidly melting after mass prayers were offered.
Really? Niagara Falls.
That's the anecdote included in the source, presented as evidence of collective prayer's power to influence even physical elements.
Okay. And the final tool discussed as integral to this collective spiritual endeavor is the role of Yagya. What's that about?
Yagya is presented as an integral practice, described as mutually supplementary with Gayatri Satana in this collective effort. The source explains its philosophy as rooted in altruistic service, refinement, and goodwill, the idea of sacrificing something, giving something up for a higher purpose.
And the practice itself?
The scientific procedure, as described in the text, involves sacrificing specific herbs in a sacred fire while chanting mantras.
Sacrificing herbs in fire with mantras. And what are the reported effects of this complex process, according to the source?
The source claims the fumes and vapors released from the sacrificed herbs purify the air, water, and soil, acting as a kind of natural cleanser.
Okay, environmental purification.
Yes, but also more. It states that the energy generated by the Yagya fire, combined with the mantra Shakti from the chanting, electrifies the surrounding prana Shakti in the atmosphere.
Electrifies the prana. What does that mean?
It's said to stimulate life force in nature and living beings and harmonize natural powers, counteracting environmental imbalances on a more subtle level, perhaps.
It also discusses yagyapathy, like a therapy.
Yes, claiming medicinal effects derived from the potentized herbs released into the atmosphere, and also mental and emotional purification. The text suggests Yagya acts like a Shabda Brahmastra, a powerful weapon of sound.
A sound weapon.
Metaphorically speaking, yeah. Capable of clearing away evils, restraining negative passions like ego, anger, and jealousy, and inducing virtues like benevolence and integrity. It specifically mentions large-scale Ashwamedha Yagyas being organized by the Parivar, the community following Acharya Shram Sharma, for eradicating evil tendencies on a wider societal scale.
So these are the foundational elements the source presents. The cosmic power of sound, mantra power, especially Gayatri, sun meditation, collective prayer, and yagya, all amplified through collective practice.
Exactly. Those are the core components described.
And the source then describes a major multi-year undertaking based on these principles, initiated by Acharya Shram Sharma as part of the Yug Nirman Yojana, the Era Transformation Plan. It calls this specific undertaking the unique spiritual experiment, or Yug Gayatri Mahapurusharam.
That's the one.
And the text clarifies the main period for this specific experiment was from 1988 to 2001. It was explicitly aimed at eliminating insidious assimilation, those negative influences, purifying the subliminal environment of consciousness, and orienting minds constructively, basically implementing the solution it proposed earlier.
Yes, and the source details how this massive experiment was reportedly conducted collectively. It wasn't just a loose collection of individuals. It was centrally coordinated from Shantikunj in Hardwar, considered the experiment's epicenter,
Right.
with participants referred to as sadhaks or Parajan's family members of the movement distributed globally, all connected to this center.
And what were they asked to do?
They were given three main duties as part of this collective effort: actively participating in social reform projects, expanding the Vichakranti Abhiyan, that campaign focused on revolutionary refinement of thinking and mass enlightenment through spiritual literature.
Okay, action and education.
And crucially, engaging in collective Gayatri meditation and mantra japa performed simultaneously. The text indicates the simultaneous practice took place at a fixed time daily, generally around sunrise, linking practitioners globally in a synchronized effort.
That synchronized collective practice sounds absolutely key to the mechanism the source proposes.
Yeah.
What was the reported scale of this effort? It must have been huge.
It sounds like it was. The source mentions an initial target in 1988 of 24 crore, which is 240 million japas per day, performed by 2.4 million participants. It estimated this required about 10 minutes of daily practice per person.
240 million japas a day.
And that was just the start. The text states that the number of participants and the total number of japas performed increased significantly over the duration of the experiment, reportedly reaching a magnificent scale of 240 billion japas per day towards the later part of the experiment in the late 1990s.
240 billion? That's almost unbelievable.
It's a staggering number presented in the source. And while the japa was done individually or in small groups, it was collectively counted towards a grand total target and was performed at fixed times, often at local centers affiliated with Shantikunj or at Shantikunj itself, contributing to that synchronized collective force.
Were there other activities involved?
Yes, the source also mentions other collective activities that supported this main effort. Things like weekly Sunday programs at local centers involving collective mental prayer, meditation, chanting, vocal japa, dipa yagyas, those small lamp ceremonies seen as symbolic yagyas songs, and satsang, or spiritual discourse.
Okay.
It also details 9-day sadhana satras held periodically at Shantikunj for more intensive collective practice. These were all part of the broader, multifaceted collective spiritual endeavor described in the text, all contributing to the stated goal of purifying the subtle environment.
So with this immense coordinated collective effort applying these spiritual tools, what were the reported real-world outcomes and milestones the source attributes to this experiment during that 1988-2001 period?
The source claims several significant developments occurred during this time. It states that momentum was gained in various social and national reconstruction projects undertaken by the movement initiatives in education, health, things like that.
Okay.
The expansion of the Vichar-Kranti Abhayan, aimed at revolutionary refinement of thinking through spiritual and philosophical dissemination, is reported to have accelerated significantly through various publications and activities. Gyan Yagyas, knowledge-focused yagyas, and karma yagyas, action-focused yagyas, are also reported as accelerating the purification of thoughts and actions.
And there were major public events marking the progress. You mentioned Purnahuti.
Absolutely. The completion, or Purnahuti, of different phases of the experiment was marked in 5 phases, from 1995 to 2001, with massive public gatherings and large-scale yagyas.
Like which ones?
The source highlights specific events like the Ashwamedha Yagya held in Valkeda in 1995, which it reports was attended by 4 million people.
4 million people. Wow.
Yeah. It mentions a Sadhana Varsha, a year of spiritual practice in 1999, with round-the-clock 24-hour japa and extra japas specifically dedicated to world peace. There were also massive collective prayer events like mass prayers for health in December 1999, reportedly involving over 1 crore people, which is 10 million, and for mind illumination in February 2000.
Incredible scale.
The text details large-scale Tirth Yatras, or pilgrimages, a major Jnana Yagya in Delhi in 2000, the launch of what it calls 7-fold revolutionary projects, the foundation of Deva Sanskrati Vishwavidyalaya, that university focused on spiritual and cultural studies, and the culminating Grand Purnahuti Mahayagya in Hardwar in 2000.
The final one.
Yes, which the source claims involved over 5 million people and was conducted in 1551 Yagya Kundas, or fire altars.
Those are staggering numbers and events, painting a picture of a truly massive undertaking. And what were the broader reported effects of these activities and the overall experiment on society and consciousness, according to the source? Did it claim success?
The source quotes itself describing reported effects on a wider scale, such as a stirring and enlightenment of mass mentality. It claims that during this period, compared to prevalent religious and caste clashes elsewhere, the cooperation, mutual respect, and harmony observed among participants and in the areas of influence was truly remarkable.
Interesting claim.
It also states that these activities helped clear many misconceptions people had about the practice and purpose of yagyas and significantly boosted confidence among the participants and the wider community involved.
So, based on the claims within this source, this massive, coordinated, collective spiritual effort using these specific tools had tangible positive impacts on both consciousness and society.
That's the claim made in the text, yes. It summarizes the overall reported impact by stating that the purification of the subliminal environment of consciousness is said to have begun on a cosmic scale due to this experiment.
Begun on a cosmic scale.
And based on this, the source predicts that its manifestation in the visible world will be the dawn of a new era characterized by truth, peace, and happiness in the 21st century.
A new era.
The text also claims that the participants themselves gained inner strength and became more enlightened personalities, and that the flow of prana shakti generated through their collective efforts influenced the globe positively.
Wow. Okay. So, to recap our deep dive based only on this source, we've looked at its portrayal of overwhelming global problems stemming from what it sees as a deeper, subtle imbalance in the subliminal environment of consciousness.
Right, the root cause, according to them.
We explored its proposed remedy of collective spiritual effort, powered by tools like Gayatri Japa, meditation on the sun, collective prayer, and the practice of Yagya.
Emphasizing how the source describes these working and being amplified collectively. That's key.
And we've described the reported scale and reported outcomes of the specific experimented details, conducted between 1988 and 2001, as an application of these principles.
Exactly. And just to reiterate, this entire exploration was based only on the provided text, examining its specific claims about this unique approach to transforming consciousness and addressing global challenges from what it sees as the root cause. Right.
We haven't added external information or attempted to provide instructions for modern practice, only described what the source says they did and why.
Understood. It certainly offers a very different perspective on the world's problems and their potential solutions. In a world that often feels stressed, conflicted, and facing problems that seem just too big to solve. The idea, as presented in this source, that cultivating inner peace and contributing to a collective pool of positive spiritual energy could have wider beneficial effects is, well, it's a powerful thought.
It is. It makes you think about the subtle forces at play that we might not normally consider in our everyday problem solving.
Definitely.
And the source leaves us with a compelling thought in its conclusion. It frames participation in these kinds of collective efforts not just as an option, but as the call of today.
The call of today.
Yeah. It invites the reader to see themselves not just as observers of the world's challenges, but as potential architects of the new bright era that it predicts will emerge from this transformation of consciousness. Architect of a new era. That's definitely something to sit with. What does it mean to be an architect of a new era in your own life and community, given the ideas we've explored from this source?
Yeah.
How might subtle internal shifts connect to wider external change?
It's a question worth exploring, perhaps in ways we haven't considered before.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into an unconventional approach to global challenges as presented in this unique source. We hope it's given you something interesting to reflect on.